Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today and welcome to the Astro 3D ECR Astronomers in Australia seminar series. My name is Dorota Bayer and I am an Astro 3D postdoc at the Swinburne University of Technology in Melbourne. Before we begin, we must acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. The Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people were Australia's first astronomers, and we acknowledge their long-standing systems of knowledge on which we continue to build. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the unceded lands on which we are meeting today. So both me and our second speaker, Gurvinder, are speaking to you today from the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. And our first speaker, Tanya Baroni, is speaking to you from the land of the Ngunnawal people. We pay our respect to the elders past and present and extend that respect to all First Peoples joining us here today. So why are we here? This series is facilitated by Astro 3D, the Australian Research Council Centre of Excellence for all-sky astrophysics in 3 dimensions. COVID-19 has affected our ability to travel and present at international seminars this year, especially for us in Australia at 3 in the morning. And this lack of opportunity to network could disadvantage junior astronomers when entering the job market. And this series aims to combat these issues by providing a platform for junior Australian astronomers to present their work to the world. So a little bit of housekeeping. There will be 2 talks over the next hour. Each will be 20 minutes with 5 minutes for questions at the end to give speakers a 5-minute warning. Please save your questions until the end of each talk, but feel free to use the chat function for questions if you prefer. These talks are also being recorded and will be placed afterwards on Astro 3D YouTube channel for educational and scientific purposes. Finally, by being here today, you agree to abide by Astro 3D's code of conduct. Okay, so our second speaker is Gurvarinder, a final year PhD student at the Swinburne University of Technology in Melbourne. And Gurvarinder will be talking to us about the impact of cosmic environments on galaxy evolution. So Gurvarinder, the screen is yours.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you for joining here today for this talk. My name is Gurvarinder, and I'm a PhD student at Cass, Swinburne University. And my PhD project is related to tracing the distribution and growth of baryons in the nearby cosmic web. And well, that is the official title I'm using for my thesis. But if I want to put it into simpler words, the essence of my project is to study how cosmic web drives galaxy evolution, or more specifically, how the different cosmic web environments, both local and global, shape and influence the baryonic properties of the galaxies. In this talk, I will share a few of the key results from my analysis. So I will start with very briefly talking about the cosmic web, which of course needs no formal introduction. So the structure that we see in the universe today is the result of the amplification of tiny velocity as well as density perturbations in the pristine primordial universe because of the anisotropic gravitational collapse of matter. And this anisotropic gravitational collapse along the 3 principal axes has led to the formation of different cosmic features, different features in the cosmic web. And the 4 basic ones are the clusters. These are the high density regions in the cosmic web that contains hundreds to thousands of galaxies. And these clusters are located at the intersection of thread-like filaments. The third feature are the tenuous sheet-like structures called whorls. Unfortunately, these are not visible in the image. And last but not the least, there are huge, sparsely populated regions called voids. So the mass transport analysis of the matter between the cosmic environments state that the filaments are the cosmic web features that facilitate the migration of both the dark as well as the baryonic matter from the underdense regions of the cosmic web to the high density regions. So for the rest of the talk, I will focus on the cosmic web features of the filaments. It's this analysis from the mass transport is leads to us to investigate and ask the question that to what extent the filaments shape and influence the properties of the galaxies that reside in them. So because filaments is going to be the focus of my discussion, I will list some of the basic properties that are already present in the literature. So the filaments are the most prominent feature in the cosmic web. And although voids occupy the majority of the volume because they are like huge bubble-like empty spaces in the cosmic web, but the filaments are the most abundant environment and contains more than 50% of the total mass in the universe. So I have already mentioned that clusters are located at the intersection of the filaments. Moreover, the filaments are the intermediate density environments that host the lower mass galaxy associations called groups. And the halo mass of these groups is approximately of the order of 10 raised to power 13 halo masses, solar masses, sorry. Um, Moving on to the geometrical properties that have been investigated. On the basis of that, three types of filaments have been detected so far. So the first category are the filaments that are connected to clusters on both the ends. So these are the filaments that are the most prominent in the cosmic web. They have high densities and they are tightly packed with halos, especially the massive ones. The second category of filaments are the ones that are connected to a cluster at one end, but branch off to an underdense region on the other end. Compared to the first category of filaments, these filaments have much lower densities and they host the halos with lower masses. Finally, we have the filaments that are not connected to any clusters on both the ends, and they are very thin and they are sparsely populated with halos. So following this line of geometrical properties of filaments, this helps us in investigating and comparing the properties of the galaxies that reside in different types of filaments, leading us to address an important question of whether or not the geometrical properties of the underlying structure affect the evolutionary path of the galaxies. So this forms the like sub part of the question I have already quoted above, but it is not limited to the filaments alone. It can be extended to other structures like voids and walls as well. And this, I'm currently working on this analysis. It is not complete, so I won't be talking further about further about the results that I get from this analysis. I was just because I come from a mathematical background. I was more interested in the geometrical aspect of these filaments. So regarding the properties of the galaxies in the filaments, we have a rich literature supporting the fact that the aggregate properties of the galaxy, such as stellar mass, color, morphology, etc., depend upon the local as well as the global environment. For example, the stellar mass of the galaxies that are located very close to the axis of the filament that are supposed to be the high density regions is much higher as compared to the stellar mass of their much distant counterparts. For example, the galaxies that are situated at the periphery of the voids. Another important baryonic property that can be traced as a function of the large scale structure is the specific star formation rate. Similar to the stellar mass, there are numerous studies conducted on this baryonic property as a function of the large scale structure, stating that as the galaxies migrate towards the excess of the filaments, their star formation activity drops. As is shown by the red curve on the plot on the right hand side. This red curve traces the offset in specific star formation rate as a function of distance from the filament. So this is not exactly the specific star formation rate, but offset in the specific star formation rate. So the objective of using the offset is because the specific star formation rate is dependent on stellar mass. So the offset is calculated with respect to a reference value of specific star formation rate so as to remove the stellar mass dependency. And after the removal of the stellar mass dependency, it is clearly seen the red curve drops as it moves closer and closer to the filament excess. So there is an obvious imprint of the large scale environment on the specific star formation rate of the galaxies. I am specifically quoting stellar mass and specific star formation rate out of all the aggregate properties of the galaxies that are out there, because for my analysis, I am only focusing on the stellar mass and the specific star formation rate. And the target field I am using for my analysis is G23, which is one of the south fields in the Gamma Spectroscopic Survey. This was supposed to be a pilot region with the plans of expanding the analysis to a much wider volume in the southern hemisphere. The choice of this target field was motivated by the fact that the redshift catalog for this region has very high completeness limit, and I will explain the absolute importance of having a high completeness limit for this kind of analysis further in the slides. And moreover, it also has a group catalog that would help me define the small scale environment, because I've already said that the objective of my analysis is to study the variation in the baryonic properties of the galaxies as a function of both the small scale as well as the large scale environment in the cosmic web. So the stellar mass and the star formation rate for the galaxies in G23 is calculated using the mid-infrared photometry extracted from the remosaicked WISE images. And the limit of my analysis is confined to a redshift of 0.1, because the W3 WISE band, which is used as a star formation indicator, is most sensitive up to the redshift of 0.1, and beyond that redshift, it starts to lose its sensitivity as well as information. So my analysis would be limited to the redshift of 0.1. And obviously, as we move away in the redshift space, we lose information on the low mass galaxies. So to ensure the mass completeness of my sample, I choose the galaxies that have the stellar mass of greater than 10 raised to power 9.5 solar masses. For defining, because I am also probing the small scale environment, and I use the G23 group catalog for that. And instead of using the local density as the measure of the small scale environment, I categorize my galaxy sample into the grouped galaxies that have membership greater than 4, pairs and triples, and the ungrouped galaxies. So the next step is the extraction of the filamentary structure in my target field. So in the observational reality, galaxies are the tracer of the cosmic web. So in order to extract the large scale structure from the Redshift catalog, I use a software called Disperse. This is a geometry based algorithm, and its purpose is to identify the most prominent, most persistent and prominent topological features. It does give information about clusters and walls and voids, but it is primarily it is a filament extracting algorithm. So the main caveat for disperse is that the filaments circumscribe voids. So here comes the importance of using a Redshift catalog, which has a high completeness limit. Because if the Redshift catalog has low completeness limit, the incomplete regions or the sparsely populated regions would be seen as voids by disperse, and it would lead to the identification of spurious filaments, which could lead to erroneous results. So the the Redshift catalog is used as an input for disperse, and the main idea is to map out the points that have higher density as compared to the random distribution of the galaxies in the region. And these high density ridges are where the filament backbones will sit. So in addition to the filamentary structure that we get from disperse, it also provides additional information in the form of critical points. And one of the critical points can be used to map the dark matter, the location of the dark matter halos in the filamentary network that we get from disperse. So this software can be used in two modes, 2D mode as well as the 3D mode. So in 2D mode, it accepts Redshift slices as it inputs. So it only requires RA, right ascension, and the declination or the RA deck of the galaxies. But in the 3D mode, we can do the entire chunk of the volume we have for the target field. And I use the 3D mode for my analysis, and it also minimizes the errors that can arise from the edges by using the Redshift slices of the 2D mode. So this is the visualization of the filamentary environment, that the filamentary structure that is extracted using disperse. The white points in the background are the galaxies from the G23 Redshift catalog. The yellow thread-like structures are the filament spine and the backbones from disperse. And these red spheres are the critical points that I mentioned that can be used to map the location of the dark matter halos, and they're also known as the nodes. So using the information of these filamentary structure and the G23 Redshift catalog, I can easily calculate the closest perpendicular distance of each galaxy from the closest filament. So moving on to the results. So the specific star, I plot specific star formation rate of the different galaxies in the different small scale environment as a function of the distance from the filament. So the obvious eye-catching trend at first glance is that as the galaxies are moving closer and closer to the filament spine, there is no obvious trend that is observed in the specific star formation rate of the ungrouped galaxies or the pairs and triples and the grouped galaxies separately. It's like the specific star formation rate is insensitive to the large scale environment. But on the other hand, if we see the trend in the small scale environment, the grouped galaxies are obviously having very low specific star, having low specific star formation rate as compared to the galaxies that are sitting in the pair environment or a triple environment or the ungrouped or the isolated environment. The obvious, like it's for the grouped galaxies because they don't stray away much from the filament spine. The number of the bins is low as compared to the pairs and triples and the ungrouped galaxies, and the only statistically robust bin that I can obtain from my data set is the first one. The second bin is like a very few galaxies, grouped galaxies are present at the distance beyond 2 megaparsec from the filament spine. So it's not that statistically robust. Uh, so moving on to the second
Five minutes.
moving on to the second property that I want to analyze, that is the stellar mass as a function of the distance from the filament. A similar trend is seen as seen by the specific star formation rate, that the galaxies in different small scale environment are insensitive to the stellar mass of these galaxies are insensitive to the distance from the filament. There is an obvious vertical gradient. So the stellar mass of the galaxies only increases as they jump from one small scale environment to the next. And Obviously the grouped galaxies which were sitting at the bottom of the specific star formation rate with very low star formation activity are sitting at the top of the stellar mass chart with the highest stellar masses out of the three galaxy populations. Apart from these two diagnostic plots, another diagnostic plot that can be used to assess the star formation activity of the galaxies is the quenched fractions. For calculating the quenched fractions, we need the number of the quenched galaxies or the quenching galaxies. So in order to do that, I use the star formation rate and the stellar mass plane. So this line which lies 2 sigma below the star formation main sequence for the galaxies is used as a quenching separator. So all the galaxies lying below this line are categorized as the quenching galaxies, and all the galaxies above this line are categorized as the star forming galaxies. So using this criteria to categorize the galaxies for the galaxies in different small scale environments, let's first look at the behavior of the ungrouped galaxies. Here I have divided the distance from the filament into 3 categories, with the distance up to 0.8 being the closest to the galaxies, the distance from 0.8 to 5 megaparsec as the intermediate distance, and beyond 5 megaparsec are the galaxies that are not associated with the filament at all. So as is seen from the trend, the ungrouped galaxies are like, they show similar behavior at whatever distance they are located at the from the center, from the filament axis. And that is what we have seen in the specific star formation rate plot, that the ungrouped galaxies on their own don't show any variation in their star formation rate activity as a function of the large scale environment. On the other hand, this plot is for the galaxies that are situated very close to the filament spine, that is within the 0.8 megaparsec. So the blue dots show the grouped galaxies, purples are the pairs, and the red are the ungrouped galaxies. And at the lower mass end of the trends, we see that the grouped galaxies show a much higher quenched fraction, then the pairs and triples, and the ungrouped galaxies, indicating that the group interactions are much more dominant, and they influence the star formation rate activity much more as compared to the galaxies that are sitting in a pair environment. However, at the higher mass end, the trend is like not very clear, and I would like to point that the continuous segregation of the galaxies into the smaller and smaller bins reduce the statistical power in each bin. And with my current analysis, which I'm doing in a much wider area, I would be able to produce more statistical results. So the takeaways from this talk is that the large scale environment, the small scale environment is more dominant than the large scale environment, while influencing the specific star formation rate, the star formation rate activity, and the stellar mass of the galaxies, as well as the group interaction is much more prominent as compared to the interaction of the galaxies in the pair environment. So these are the two important takeaways from my analysis, and I will leave you with the view of the groups, the 2DF groups in the SGP region of the 2DF catalog. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gurvarinder. Very nice talk. Do we have questions?
Again, can I ask one?
Yes, please ask.
Yeah, thank you. That's a very nice presentation. Certainly, it's a very interesting topic. And also you demonstrated that it's a result in analysis pretty much suffer from the samples, right? So it's very, difficult to get enough sample to demonstrate the robust conclusion. So I was wondering, have you ever considered applying your technique to the simulated galaxy population from the computers, right? So this is not the quite real universe, but certainly they have a precise, the locations and the velocity and redshift, all this information. I think you will certainly identify the structures and filament and voids and everything, and with enough number of samples, so you might end up being the better statistics to convince yourself this is really what's happening. Then obviously you can get more insight from the observation. So do you have a plan?
With the simulations, with the amount of time I have left in my PhD, I don't think so. I would be able to work with the simulations, but after completing my PhD, if I had a chance to work with the simulations, I would definitely would. But going through, but my main purpose was like not getting into the simulations, because obviously, as you have pointed out, it's not exactly a very realistic view of the universe. But yeah, I wanted to try out the results with the observational data as well, to see where the discrepancies are as compared to the what we see in the simulations.
Yeah, certainly the one thing you can verify that you apply the method disperse is actually really works well for the simulated data or not, because you already know the structures for 100% accuracy, right? So
yeah, it does. Like, other people have used this software on the simulated data, and it does work well with that.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very nice project. So looking forward to seeing more results. Thanks.
Thank you.